Welcome Aries. On the 3rd of March, a total lunar eclipse in the practical Virgo provides a dynamic backdrop for the next 6 months. Whenever we have lunations, there's always a lot of comments, but it's really important to work with an eclipse that we understand the exact nature of each one on its own merits. I'm going to share with you your event chart purely from an Aries perspective. I'm also going to share with you the bigger picture of the eclipse series we're in, but also the one that's just began on the 17th of February in the progressive sign of Aquarius, very much about our higher purpose. And at the end of the video, you'll have a clear picture of what you can expect in terms of relationships, finance, energy, and work. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundel. A very warm welcome. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, please do so now and help it to continue to thrive. Now, I'm going to share that event chart, but I'm also going to give you the opportunity to get my total lunar eclipse workbook. I'll tell you more about that later, but that will help you too to work with this energy quite literally in a very productive way. So on the screen, and you can see the moon is at 12 degrees and 53 in Virgo. But it's also in the second decan of the sign, which is sub-ruled by Saturn. So that does bring a little bit more of a serious perspective to the event. But it's also very close to Zosma, a fixed star, which can have a reputation for being very sensitive, but also somewhat melancholy, particularly if things aren't quite right. And one of the things I feel you will need to work at over the next half year is not being too self-critical. We can always find things, all of us, that perhaps are a little bit irritating, and then that motivates us to create a change in our environment to improve things. So you might find, because it's a very structural place for the moon to be, that you do get a bit more of an appetite to make your home neater, tidier, catch up on the domestic chores. But one of the things that's very important is that self-criticism, because on the other side of the heavens, Aries, is the position of the sun. And the sun is in the second decan of Pisces over here, sub-ruled by the moon. So very, very sensitive. And your ruler Mars has also just moved into the sign of Pisces. Now, in an overall context, over the next 6 weeks, Mars potentially can stir up within you any sediment from past hurts, upsets, disappointments, breakups that you may have experienced, and could see your moods being a little up and down. But the best way to work with any kind of full moon or a total lunar eclipse is to try to integrate the two polarities at each end of the axis in the best way possible. So this stellium of energy in Pisces, potentially very emotional, but the opportunity is, if you work on your inner self in a way which is not judgmental, that comes to accept some of the things that may have been hurtful in your past, even if you are feeling very nostalgic, or you do feel a need to reach out to someone from your past as well. What you're being asked to do is to allow that energy, but not in any way criticize it, because the perfectionism that can come from the moon in Virgo is very real, particularly in that second decan with Saturn in the mix. So in other words, I think what you're being asked to do, Aries, is to come to terms over the next half year. But really, because we have another eclipse in this series towards the end of August, and then the final one occurs on the 20th of February next year. The whole eclipse series began on the 18th of September 2024. At that time in Pisces, very close to the shimmering energies of Neptune, now in your zodiac time full time. So if you have encountered over the last year and a half or so a heightened sense of sensitivity, it wouldn't really be a surprise. But finding that balance between the practical domain, which can be about work, it can be about our obligations, responsibilities, where we want things to work efficiently. But if they don't entirely do so, it's important to give yourself a little bit of a break. Otherwise, you may find that your moods are oscillating very powerfully over the next half year. But this particular eclipse has got a really powerful ally, and it's in the guise of Jupiter. Jupiter continues in its retrograde through to the 11th of March in the sign of Cancer, which is a water sign like Pisces, but it's where Jupiter is exalted. Now, most people are aware of Jupiter's influence over Sagittarius, which is enthusiastic, confident, self assured, loves to travel, widen its horizons. But actually, Jupiter is the traditional ruler of the water sign of Pisces. And the Sun and Jupiter are in a mutually receptive relationship. So the Sun's in a trine with Jupiter, one of astrology's most potent and powerful and potentially fortunate influences. But because they're in watery locations and you're a fire sign, you have to give yourself the permission to let that sensitivity come in. And that's where that potentially picky moon is something you really need to work on. So if you find yourself thinking about something and perhaps really ruin the fact that it's not quite perfect, or there's an element of your environment that's not quite as you would like, that's true for many of us, then as much as you should acknowledge it for sure, it's important to own it, but work with it, to soothe it, not let it dominate you. Because if you can allow your feelings to flow, there's a lot of opportunities over this next half year for you. But it can be around your emotional world. So if you're up, for example, for some healing, if you are open to having some counseling, if you want to retrain in a job which enables you to use your soul purpose a lot more than just that fiery drive, again, that's something you can make work for you. Also, if you want to make some physical changes to your home, Jupiter's in the fourth house, you can do so, Jupiter and the moon in that lovely sextile, with a degree of positivity and confidence. So that's intriguing. And that energy there with Mars having pitched up does suggest, especially with Mars initially in the sign of Pisces for 6 weeks, just to be aware of how your moods could oscillate. But we do also have Venus in a very dynamic and positive link to Uranus. And I think if you do get some things coming up, could be brainwaves. It could be a dream that is very powerful, that informs you in a way which is very motivating. But your hunches can be very important, particularly in terms of making money and progressing your situation positively. And the last eclipse, which occurred on the 17th of February in the progressive Aquarius, the new series, we have Pluto in that sign, continuing to suggest that things are evolving as far as your long term future, but it's being met, or increasingly will be met, by Saturn. As Saturn moves forwards towards the end of March, those two are going to be in an exact sextile. So, something you're wanting to do in the future or to transform your existing situation can be done, but I feel there may be some deeper things that need some soothing, some attention, and potentially some time. And if you give yourself the opportunity to get into nature, to have some rest, to perhaps do some meditations, listen to beautiful music, have a vacation by water, have a spa day, all of these things can be very good for your practical well-being. So as far as your health is concerned over the next half year, if there's a lot of stress in the practical world, particularly through your work, and you're not giving yourself the time to really have some moments of rest and relaxation, there will be there will be a biting point from that. But if you give yourself the permission to be perhaps a little more vulnerable at times, to work on things that may be outstanding in as far as your psychology is concerned, that can all bring energy into the sign of Virgo and be very healing, and you can find your physical vitality will improve. Now, when it comes to relationships, you do have Venus in that very dynamic link to Uranus. If you connect to someone and it feels right and it happens quickly, just go with the flow. As far as finances are concerned, well, finances again are governed by the second house. Uranus there in that link with Venus can also be very positive for you. Those hunches can pay off. You may get a brainwave that really can be very dynamic for you indeed. Now, as far as your career is concerned, the path of fortune is right at the top of your chart. It's very, very close to forging a trine with the moon and a sextile with the sun. I think that's very encouraging indeed. For a sign like yours that is governed by Mars and is very much about being dynamic on the front foot, taking charge, giving yourself the permission to pause, reflect, and rest is not necessarily easy. But if we think about the big, big picture, Saturn and Neptune are asking you not to charge forwards too quickly. So there may be something symbolically that you're still bringing to a close, wrapping up. There may be something that just needs your time and energy. And if you accept that, work with that, that's going to boost your dynamism in a physical context. If you push to one side because it feels uncomfortable or makes you feel a bit frail, uh, or maybe a little exposed, that 12th house energy, the chances are your physical health, if not bad, will just perhaps not be quite as energized as possible. So, with eclipses, but particularly lunar eclipses, it's about balancing the more masculine energies of the sun and the more feminine energies of the moon. On the screen now, Aries, is your March deep dive video. Please check that out if you've yet to do so. But on the second screen, you can download my Lunar Eclipse workbook to help you navigate this next 6 months. If you'd like to work with me one to one, please see the testimonials below. If you'd like to take advantage of my unique combination reports, you can order your 12-month forecast, but also get your life roadmap report. That gives you searing insights into the patterns that are played out in your life so far. Everyone is totally individual to the person it's produced for. At the checkout, please apply Astro 26 and you'll get 50% off. If you'd like to understand your draconic, soul, or karmic journey, if you go to the checkout, you can order the same combination but apply Draco 26 and get 50% off.